No one would ever call Aliya a little bird again, or Monica a butterfly. No one would play with mischievous Leah or teach her how to shoot. No one would create any fantastic building project anymore. Only memories would remain, only the warmth in the heart they invoked, and the bitterness of loss. "Sweetheart, I can't live in this house anymore." One evening when Leah was already asleep, Aliya said quietly, "I think we need to sell the house and buy something smaller." "Whatever you say, Mom. To be honest, it's hard for me to stay here too. Everything reminds me of Dad, of his jokes," she sniffled. "You're right. We need to sell this house when it's possible." And so the mother and daughter did. They sold the large house lovingly designed for them and moved to a modest cottage almost right on the coast. The sea carried away sadness and instilled hope for the better. It became a little easier. The house smelled of cookies again. Students started coming to Aliya again. Monica still worked at the school. It seemed like everything was slowly getting back on track. But Aliya was yet to face another trial, a terrible trial. There were no signs of trouble. Monica and her daughter were planning to visit Isabella, Monica's best friend. She lived quite far from them, so they were going for a few days. "Maybe you won't go," helping to pack things in a small suitcase, Aliya said. "Mom, we've already agreed. Isabella is waiting for us. She bought a bunch of gifts for Leah and prepared enough food for probably 100 people. You'll be lonely, won't you? We won't be gone for long. We'll be back in 3 days, okay, darling? Forgive me. I keep trying to keep you and Leah close to me. I'm getting old." "Mom, you're not getting old at all. You're the youngest and most beautiful among us," Monica said. Aliya sometimes called her daughter that. In childhood, the girl always scolded her mom for it, but now she even liked it. Yes, Mom always came up with something. She was such a character. The daughter and granddaughter did not return home. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Aliya received a call and was told the worst news imaginable for this woman. "Your daughter and granddaughter died in a car accident. Their bodies were burned beyond recognition." "I'm very sorry," said the voice on the other end of the line. Aliya stood there thunderstruck, the ground slipping from beneath her feet. No, it couldn't be true. No, it couldn't be her girls. It must be a mistake. Monica would call any moment now, cheerfully telling her that everything was fine with Lori, that they would be together again soon. But Monica didn't call. Aliya had to identify her loved ones' bodies by the items that survived. Yes, those were her daughter's earrings and her granddaughter's bracelet. At that moment, life ended for Aliya. She stood by the grave for a long time talking to herself. Why me? Why did this have to happen to me? First Oren, my dear Oren with his radiant eyes, and then my babies, my lovely girls. What did I do wrong? Where did I sin? What did I do to deserve such punishment? Why should I go on living now? Tears streamed down the woman's pale cheeks as she clutched her handkerchief with trembling hands, not even attempting to wipe them away. Aliya had always been slender, but now she seemed entirely drained of life from grief and sorrow. Aliya often visited the cemetery. Her husband's grave wasn't here. He had asked for his ashes to be scattered at sea. Aliya and Monica fulfilled their last wish. But there was the grave of her daughter and little granddaughter. The woman would stand there for a long time, placing fresh flowers and crying. The only thing that saved Aliya was her students. Through her handicrafts, she could momentarily forget her triple sorrow. She was afraid to be alone. Thoughts overwhelmed her, and she felt like she was going crazy, like she would be torn apart by grief and memories. I'd rather be dead too, thought Aliya, lying sleepless in bed. Why did I let them go? My girls would be with me now, and we'd laugh and bake cookies. Sometimes Aliya couldn't close her eyes. Until morning, she tried to occupy herself in the small garden surrounding her house, so empty and even hostile as it seemed to Aliya. But nothing worked. Everything slipped from her hands. She would throw it aside, retreat to the gazebo, and spend hours looking at their family photo. 5 months had passed since Monica and Lori had been laid to rest. On that day, Aliya stood once again at the graves of her beloved girls. She cried again, silently sobbing nearby. A cemetery worker, obviously from his uniform, was clearing away dry flowers and slowly placing them in a black bag. "Excuse me, is this your daughter?" he suddenly asked Aliya. "Yes, my daughter Monica and granddaughter Lori." "She looks a lot like you," he said. looking at the photo of the young woman. Same thoughtful eyes and gentle smile. "Thank you." Aliya sniffled slightly. "Many people tell me we look alike, even though she's not blood-related to me. Foster daughter, yes. Although it's just a heaven-sent gift. They left her right under a bush in a tattered basket. Who could abandon this angel in a basket full of holes? I still can't fathom it. Well, but if I tell you what I did over 25 years ago, you won't even want to talk to me. Nobody knows about it, only me and that person." "What person?" "That person to whom I sold my newborn daughter." "Mother of God, what made you do that?" Aliya asked without judgment, and the cemetery worker told the woman his story, which subsequently changed both their lives. Samuel, the cemetery worker, was dating a simple girl named Aviva, Anita, as he always called her. They loved each other very much. Samuel was determined to marry her. He was 19 at the time, and Aviva had just turned 17. One evening, Aviva, as usual, waited for her beloved on the blue bench near the old plane tree. Samuel was working for a man involved in fish processing in a small workshop. "Ricky," Aviva started straight away. "We need to talk. It's very important." "What's wrong, my berry Ricky?" I'm pregnant." She lowered her eyes. "Aviva, you don't worry. We'll handle this together. I work. Let's move in together. I only have an old grandmother whom I can't leave. She loves you. She's just very weak." "Are you serious?" "Of course I'm serious, silly. My father will kill me if he finds out." "No, we'll get married and raise our baby." Aviva threw herself into her beloved's arms and burst into tears. He stroked her curly hair and whispered words of love to her. Aviva moved in with Samuel. Her parents stopped communicating with her. Their daughter didn't meet their expectations and went down the wrong path. The guy worked, and his beloved took care of the household and his sick grandmother. Soon the grandmother passed away, and Samuel and Aviva were left alone. They were waiting for the baby to arrive. Aviva didn't go to the clinic. She was afraid that her underage status would be revealed, and Ricky would have problems with the police. In the apartment opposite where Aviva and Samuel lived, there was a woman who had worked as a midwife many years ago. She sometimes checked on the girl's condition and promised to help if anything was needed. Aviva was grateful to her and offered her help in return. Labor began unexpectedly and very quickly. Samuel ran to the neighbor, Ariel. "Please, open up." He knocked on the door opposite his apartment. Coming," was heard from behind the door somewhere deep in the little apartment. "Ariel, please, Aviva, I'll be there in a minute. I'll gather everything necessary. Go to her, my boy. Go." Anita was fading before their eyes. She had expended her last strength to help her daughter come into the world while she was fading away. "We need to call an ambulance, quickly," she said. "Hurry, go, make the call, Ricky. I love you so much," the girl whispered almost soundlessly. Samuel rushed to her side and grabbed her hand. "Anita, my sunshine, everything will be all right. I'll call the ambulance right now. I love you," he repeated. "And our little girl?" Her hand hung lifelessly, her gaze fixed. "No," Samuel cried, holding his beloved's hand to his face. "Don't leave. Don't abandon me." Rita touched his shoulder gently. "She's no longer in this world, my boy," she said slowly, closing the girl's eyes with her hand. What was he to do? How could he raise the baby alone with no one to rely on? And he needed to work. Samuel walked with the little girl in his arms, not knowing where to go. He sat on a large rock by the roadside and sat there, perhaps for half an hour. "Why so glum, buddy?" a well-dressed man asked cheerfully. "Anita, my girl, died. Couldn't handle childbirth," Samuel began to explain haltingly. "I don't know what to do. We have no one." "Listen, kid, I can help you. Give the child to me. My wife and I will be good parents to her." "Why do you want someone else's child?" he asked, surprised. "My wife can't have children, and we've been dreaming of a baby. What can you give her? How will you feed her?" "I'll pay you, and no one will ever know what happened here, I promise." Samuel glanced at his child and handed her to the man. He didn't even ask for his name, just noticed that the man's eyes were glowing with kindness. He took the baby with one hand and handed him a thick bundle of money with the other. "Be happy, brother," the man said and quickly walked away. Samuel stood bewildered by the roadside. Then he put the money in his jacket pocket and headed in the opposite direction. He still had to bid farewell to his beloved Anita every day. I asked forgiveness from my daughter and her mother too. And you know nothing about her? Aliya asked sadly. Nothing, the interlocutor quietly replied. What's your name? Aliya asked Samuel. I'm Samuel. Very nice to meet you, Doña Aliya. And to me, Don Samuel. With that, they parted ways. At home, Aliya recalled the story of the gravedigger. Why does it happen like this? The one who could give everything to a child and wanted it more than anything. God didn't allow them to be a mother, and this little one's mother was taken away right after birth. It's so unfair, Aliya thought, sitting in the gazebo in the middle of her neglected garden. The woman couldn't find an answer. A week later, Aliya headed back to the cemetery. She was about to leave when she suddenly noticed Samuel. Hello, Doña Aliya, he greeted her. Hello, Don Samuel. How are you? She replied. How can a confirmed bachelor be doing? The man sadly smiled. Don Samuel, could you tidy up my garden? I will pay you well for it. Why not help a good person? I can help. I have tomorrow off and, as you understand, no plans except for a little laundry, he said. Oh, that's wonderful then. How about around 11? I'll write down the address and phone number now, she said, pulling out a notebook from her leather bag, scribbling something in it with a silver pen, quickly tearing out the sheet and handing it to her companion. He tucked the sheet into the breast pocket of his work jacket and promised not to be late. The next day at the appointed hour, Samuel stood outside Aliya's house. Hello, Don Samuel. Glad to see you. She opened the door and said, Hello, Doña Aliya. Would you like some tea? Hello, Don Samuel. Let's deal with your garden first, and then we can have tea. He smiled. You have a very beautiful house and a lovely garden, too, he remarked. Thank you. We used to have a huge house. My husband designed it himself. And then after his death, my daughter and I sold that house to get rid of painful memories and bought this little house for the two of us. But now, I'll have to live here alone, Aliya concluded sadly. Well, let's go. I'll show you where the necessary tools are kept, Aliya said. 2 hours later, the garden was unrecognizable. You've done a great job. Thank you, Aliya said almost cheerfully. They drank tea in the gazebo, which resembled a lace tent. Do you bake these cookies yourself, Samuel? Aliya asked. I used to. My girls and I used to bake them. I haven't done it since that dreadful day. But yesterday I decided to make them to please you. After all, there's no one left to please me anymore, Aliya said sadly. Don't say that. You're not old at all and you managed to please me, Samuel said suddenly. Samuel's gaze stopped at a simple necklace around Aliya's neck. It was a round wooden pendant adorned with carving. Something stirred in him, and his heart suddenly raced. Doña Aliya, where did you get this necklace? He asked. This? She pointed to her pendant. Yes, that. I found this pendant wrapped in swaddling clothes with my Monica. There's an engraving on it. The letter A. Probably someone's name started with this letter. After the death of my girls, I started wearing it constantly, as if they were always with me, Aliya explained. Samuel suddenly turned pale. He remained silent and motionless. Only his large, sad eyes blinked frequently, as is usual when one tries to hold back tears. What's wrong with you, Don Samuel? Aliya asked, alarmed. It's her, the man struggled to say. It's my daughter, your Monica. I sold her to your husband many years ago. This pendant. I carved it for my Anita. Samuel covered his face with his hands and silently cried. Aliya began to sob. What did you say? Aliya suddenly remembered. My husband bought our little girl from you. Yes. He handed me a thick bundle of money, said it was for the funeral of my Anita, and even managed to set some aside for a rainy day. I can't even bear to remember it. It makes me feel sick to my stomach. But back then it seemed like the only way out. And Oren told me he found... Monica is under a bush in a rickety basket. It's so strange. He never lied to me. Samuel shrugged. Yeah, what's the use of remembering all this now? My girl is gone anyway. Or rather, my girls. My precious little ones. Aliya began wiping away tear after tear, which, like dewdrops on flower petals, rolled down her emaciated face as she bid farewell to Samuel. Donor Aliya, do come over for tea sometime. We essentially share the same grief. It seems easier to cope with it together, Samuel said. I think I agree. It's easier together, the man replied, rubbing his nose with 2 fingers. Of course. So shall we see each other? Until we meet again, Samuel. It seemed to Aliya that she had found a brother she had never had. It was so easy to communicate with Samuel, so pleasant to accept his help around the house and to delight him with delicious meals. She felt that he also enjoyed her company because he found someone who not only didn't judge him for what he had done, but also shared his pain. During one lunch, Aliya and Samuel talked about various things. You know, I sleep so poorly, Aliya complained. Sometimes I can't close my eyes until dawn. Even sleeping pills don't help. It seems to make it worse. I had that too, Samuel admitted. Didn't sleep for days, wandered around like a shadow. But a herb helped me. What? Aliya exclaimed. No, it's not what you think. I have a friend. He lives in the capital now. His father is an herbalist, lives in a cottage in the middle of the forest and treats people. There was always a crowd at his place. At least the last time I was there was about 10 years ago. He helped me and gave me some concoction. The insomnia went away and my nerves calmed down a bit. Wow, living deep in the woods in this day and age. It's like something out of a fairy tale about magical gnomes, smiled Aliya. Is it far? She asked. Not really. Let's go. Maybe he's still available, Samuel replied. Let's do it, agreed Aliya. Otherwise I'll lose my mind with this insomnia. One rainy Saturday morning, Samuel picked up Aliya in his old pickup truck, and they set off to visit the forest, as they jokingly called the herbalist. They drove out of town with fields on the left and ravines and forests on the right. Forests everywhere. It's picturesque here, said Aliya. Yeah, and you know, nothing changes. It's been fields and forests for the past 20 years, Samuel remarked, making a right turn. We're almost there. They arrived at an old house with a slightly crooked porch. Look, it's still standing, but there's no one around. The old man must have passed away, Samuel speculated. What a pity, Aliya sighed. But the door of the cottage creaked open, and a girl of 6 or 7 appeared on the porch. She had short curly hair joyfully sticking out in all directions. Are you here to see Grandpa? She asked briskly. Yes, darling, Aliya replied. Are you his granddaughter then? What's your name? Leah, but Grandpa calls me Elle. Oh my goodness, she looks just like my Leah, Aliya whispered to Samuel. But she's nothing like my friend nor his wife, he mused. Is that you, Samuel? Exclaimed Samuel, hugging the old man. Ricky, is that you, my boy? The old man squinted. Yes, it's me, Amos, and this is Aliya. He gestured to the woman standing beside him. Hello, she greeted. Hello, come in. How can I help you? Amos asked. Amos, you used to have a miraculous elixir for insomnia. Do you have it now? Samuel grinned broadly. I have everything. Where's Lo? Where did this little rascal go again? I told her to bring water. Oh, what a restless child, Amos said. Is she your granddaughter? Asked Aliya. You could say that. I found her. She fell from the sky, it seemed. I could hardly manage. She was just starting to come to herself, covered in bruises, had to cut her hair short like a boy, wore a bandage for a month and a half, poor thing. Why didn't you report it to the police? Aliya wondered. They must be looking for her. She was weak. I didn't want to traumatize her further. I got attached to her like my own, Amos explained. The door swung open, and Leah burst in with a pitcher of water. Granny! The girl suddenly exclaimed, nearly dropping the jug from her hands. Aliya turned to the girl and covered her mouth with her hand. Leah, my girl, is it you? It's me. Why haven't you come for so long, and where is Mom? Tears welled up in her eyes as Aliya hugged the little one close. Virgin Mary, you... She didn't finish her sentence. Samuel and Amos watched silently, as if struck dumb. It couldn't be Leah. Alive. Alive. But then who was the girl with her bracelet on her wrist? The 3 of them returned home together. Leah chatted along the way, telling her grandmother everything she could remember. We were driving with Mom along the road, and suddenly we noticed a girl. She was probably about 6, like me. Mom stopped and asked her why she was all alone there. She was crying and saying she wouldn't live with that mean aunt anymore. We put her in our car. I gave her my favorite bracelet made of stone beads. The one my grandpa gave me. And then the car hit something, and I flew down somewhere. And then I only remember a kind forest grandfather who smeared me with some ointments and gave me different bitter decoctions. I think that's what he called them. And then you arrived, my dear lord, my little one. I thought you were already dead, Aliya said quietly. And Mom died, right? Leah asked somewhat maturely. Aliya nodded. She didn't want to lie to her granddaughter, but she couldn't find the strength to talk about Monica's death. And who is this man driving? Leah asked. This little one. This is your grandfather. How? My grandfather Oren is already dead. That's right, my joy. But this is another one of your grandfathers, Grandfather Samuel. Leah didn't ask anything else, dozing off on Granny's shoulder. Aliya and Samuel didn't speak either. They knew for sure that a completely different life had begun. Now they had a reason to live. How fortunate it was that Samuel approached Aliya at the cemetery and started that difficult conversation. If not for that conversation, perhaps they would have never found their Leah, their one granddaughter, for both their precious hearts. Dear viewers, if you enjoy the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.